Good afternoon, everybody. I hope you've had a good lunch, and I hopefully will have this talk to be interesting enough for you not to sleep. Um, just before I start, the topic is co-development, and I just want to start off by saying I had a rather different presentation that was planned, which was using an example of a game that we made with the publisher, and I had the permissions for that yanked off at the last minute, so I've had to rejig my slides to kind of keep it very generic and talk at a very high level. Nonetheless, I'm going to try and do justice to this topic. One second. So, just a brief slide about Dhruva. We are a developer for the last 15 years. We're the oldest games company in India, and we've been a leading game services company. We've been working with a number of the top publishers and developers across the world. Mainly have had a presence in the console segment, doing services for a lot of console titles, but in the last 3-4 years, we've been doing a lot of work in mobile, Android, iOS, web-based downloadable games, and so on. So, I define co-development as collaborative game development between a client and a partner company from concept to delivery. And this approach works well for clients who either do not have a complete team. As an example, someone who is maybe coming from a creative agency kind of a background, an ad agency background. They have some ideas that they want to do, but they don't know how, they don't have a team which can develop it. And they would like to start off with a high-level idea with a game developer and flesh it out and build a design and then take it to completion. That is one kind of a company that could need to use co-development services. The other could be that there is a small team and they want to kind of supplement their capabilities by working with someone who has a greater degree of bandwidth, so that you could achieve time to market and also the inherent cost advantages in case you want a partner who's in countries like India and Vietnam and China and so on. I think while we have, so in co-development, what you end up is really having a virtual team which may be spread across two locations and 2 geographies and 2 time zones, but essentially working as one and on that product. The only clear difference is that the client tends to usually own the IP and is the owner of the vision of the title, the vision of what they want to put out there to the market, and that's the clear differentiation. Otherwise, while they're working on that game, it's literally like one team that is working together. So, selecting a co-development partner, I think clearly what is really important is to first understand what is it that you need from that partner. What are your strengths and weaknesses, and what are the areas in which you feel you're incomplete, and what is it that you really want from your development partner so that you could achieve your objective. In the case of, like I gave the example before, in the case of, let's say, a creative shop which does not really do game development themselves, it's clear that they need a development partner which can help them through the whole life cycle. In the case of a team which has creative ownership and has the leadership level people, be it for art, design, and programming, and they just need the bandwidth, then that's a different kind of requirement. So it's clear, it's absolutely important for a client to kind of determine what kind of a partner they need and what kind of help they need. And in the process of due diligence of potential partners and vendors, very, very important that they understand clearly what are the strengths and weaknesses of the team that they are working with. And to do that, it would help for you to have a look at the team's profile, to review the past work that that team would have done. And of course, nothing works as good as doing a kind of a pilot or a project or a test with that group. Of course, even early pre-production along with the team that you have chosen to work with will give you a lot of insight into what that team can do and cannot do. And that should kind of help a client to kind of, or a team to kind of get to kind of course correct in terms of expectations and in terms of, additional criteria that they may need to, to kind of assess and to perhaps even potentially change the vendor at that stage. So a quick checklist to set yourself up for co-development. Clearly, project management, and within project management is the whole gamut of process for project management, including change management, which is critical. Change is just a reality in our development cycles. The best of products, have an iterative nature to how they kind of evolve to becoming that good product. And so it's very important to have not just a project management process, but also change management process. And at what point, who calls out a change and who's going to validate that. They're also very important in a virtual team situation is to kind of have your communication plan in place. What are the touch points, who talks to whom, what are the roles and responsibilities of each other. And then, of course, things like the choice of project tracking tools, collaboration tools, and even down to, if you're going to have a Scrum, what is the periodicity of those? What are the metrics that are going to be discussed, and what gets discussed in what optimal kind of cycles? It's very important to determine all of these things. So just going a little into detail, project management, clearly scheduling, milestones, deliverables, change management and tracking at a high level. These are the things that you really need to kind of have some thought about how you're going to do all of these things. Roles and responsibilities very clearly. And then, of course, acceptance and sign-off. When does something get signed off? When does something get pushed back? I think having that and having this kind of a blueprint for how you want to work with a vendor has to be clearly established and shared with that vendor, discussed with the vendor. Perhaps you need to tweak it as well to make sure that it's kind of optimal. But very important to have the whole process kind of laid out before you start. Change management is quite important. And I think the key attributes there is to see if there is a change that is required or proposed. You need to see the importance of the change, the impact on the modules that have already been developed, doing a value and cost analysis of the change that is being proposed, the feasibility in terms of the time to market, your budgets and so on, and of course, impact on the schedule. Now, going to the communication plan, I think Scrum works really well if it's set up right. And I think pretty much irrespective of the time zone, you can always find some point in the day where, it's sensible enough for people to talk to each other. I mean, we have a lot of clients in the US West Coast, and 8 in the morning there is 8:30 in the evening in India, and 7 in the evening there is 7:30 in the morning in India during daylight saving. And it's plus 1.5 otherwise. And it's beat any territory, any country, you can always find that one or 2 hours worth of time, which is kind of okay. In the case of time zones which are lesser, that it becomes more interesting. Like for example, with the East Coast, we actually have nearly 2 hours worth of a business day which overlaps, which makes it even more interesting. And but we've never found the time zone to be an issue. Just needs a little flexibility from both sides to kind of make it work, and it's never an issue. I think the processes should be clearly defined to see what has to be shared between the team, and also the frequency at which the information has to be updated. I think that is very, very, very critical. And I think, like I said, points of contact. The older approach towards a much more sliced and diced outsourcing where perhaps only art was being done, where you would have one outsourcing manager who's talking. That simply doesn't work for a co-development situation. You need the team to be, many to many communications, definitely, but then within that you need to be saying that yes, finally I think this art guy and that art guy would talk to each other and they would be the final points of contact and people to take a decision on both sides. And similarly in design and similarly in programming, I think that's very important. I think status updates, having a common Gantt chart and populating that with information, very critical, I think. And of course, using software like Basecamp and Jira definitely helps. And I think these are all web-based, cloud-based solutions, so it really works well in in a virtual team situation. So I have a slide on pre-production because I think really pre-production is the key to success of a virtual team working together. I think a few points here. For a client, I think they should have the clarity of what they want their game to be, the vision, the scope, the target audience of the game. I think these are the basic things that really need to be in place, and without which I think then there is plenty of scope to kind of meander around and lose track. Identify early and clearly communicate to a partner if there are some things which are still fuzzy. It's all right to tell your partner that we are not completely clear about this, and we are still work in progress, and maybe even invite ideas and thoughts on kind of areas of improvement. But you have to be clear that this is not locked down, this is locked down. That really helps a lot. I think the other very important thing is thorough and clear, creative and artistic communication. I think especially with countries where the sensibilities may not kind of match, it's very important to give lots of examples and lots of references and to be able to talk the same language. It's very important. So for example, if an American team is trying to work with an Indian team and gives largely very American examples of soaps and motifs, the Indian team may not just get it. So it may be necessary for you to research a bit to give examples that are a little more global, if possible. That really helps a lot. And share as much information as you can with the team. As don't hold back, because the more the team knows, the more they get involved, and the more they want to be a part of the success of that. And other than that, of course, I think very important, right at the early stage of pre-production, you must do your risk analysis, and you must know that these are the factors that are higher risk and lower risk, and kind of keep monitoring them constantly. Some best practices, I think flexibility. I think co-development should be flexible and should encourage different points of view. You should, once you've made a good choice of a good team, you should allow that team to kind of give you ideas and feedback, and perhaps it will value add. Do not curb that, do not restrict that. Don't be a control freak. That's really not a good way to do it. Encourage self-organized teams to kind of take ownership and to give that real value to your product. Creativity is heavily dependent on freedom, and you need to give that freedom so that people can come up with ideas. Provide frequent feedback. Don't wait till the end, because you don't want 3 weeks worth of a milestone completed and then you do a review and find that it's not really worked out. And ideally, with a good Scrum methodology in place, it should never happen. Never get into blame game. Doesn't help any product. I mean, even with your own team, it doesn't help. With a virtual team, with a vendor, even worse, because then there are contractual and legal issues that can come up. Do your best to avoid crunch time. It's the same thing whether it's yourself working together or a virtual team. Crunch never helps. Crunch is inversely proportional to creativity in our experience. So never a good way to do things. And look at building relationships and not hierarchy. I think once you do that, co-development works best when you work together for a while. It may not yield results right at the beginning, but once you have the relationship in place, once you know the people and what their strengths and weaknesses are, and you know how to deal with that, then it really starts giving you value over the long run. So these are just some quick points. Some few examples of games that we've developed for our clients in the past. Starting from 2005 onwards, we've done mobile games and iOS and PC games. And have done fairly well. We've got fairly good reviews for most of the products that we've done on a co-development basis. And that's it. Questions?
Yeah, what What are the kind of revenue models that you work with when you're doing co-development?
Mostly work for hire. Mostly work for hire. We do definitely have times when people come and say, would you like to do a rev share? But then it's clearly a question of kind of evaluating that as an opportunity and to see whether it makes sense. But it's mostly work for hire.
Okay. How many projects have you turned down in the past? I mean, you look at the game document of this didn't work for us.
More than 50%. Actually, more than that. If it's not a good fit, we simply say no. There's just no point in saying yes to something that you're not comfortable with. Yeah, I think that's key ingredient for success for an outsourcing company or a services shop. Learn how to say no before you say yes. So, yeah.
Within India itself, do you run a virtual office or is everyone in a centralized office?
Oh, we have a centralized office, but more and more we are seeing virtual teams within India itself, people who are working in different places. But yeah, in our case, we have 2 large studios in Bangalore. Yeah.
Have you run into issues when you're working with a co-development situation where you're doing the coding and the other developers are doing the coding? How does that process handing code back and forth?
So yeah, I think that's where things like Jira comes in. That's where having a very good system of who drops in files at what time and intimation to make sure that the build does not break, that becomes really important. It's not very complicated. I mean, if you use, like, for example, sometimes we use TFS, kind of really works well. So what are the recent updates, and even if a build breaks, you know where to go, where to trace that back to. Yeah. Key important thing is documentation and ensuring that whatever is the revision control, very, very important. And that discipline, without that discipline, virtual teams will not work. And early agreements on naming conventions and the level of documentation that you need to do, the level of commenting within code. I think some of these things should be determined and agreed upon right at the beginning as a best practice.
What is your criteria when saying no to a project?
So, if in the first place, it's whether we map us as a team for the kind of capabilities that we have, whether we map well to that requirement. So, if a client comes to us and says they have a very specific style, art style, and a very specific game mechanic, or maybe they come to us and say they want us to work in an engine that we've never used before, those would be criteria for us to say no. We wouldn't want to do something in which we do not have some degree of comfort that we can pull it off. There are times when we have a gray area, and typically with clients that we've worked with before, where there is a little more comfort to say honestly that we've not done it before, but we could give it a shot by doing maybe some amount of pre-production along with you guys and then see whether it makes sense or not. We've done that. But otherwise, the other reason could be purely a risk analysis of the client, and just as a client does a risk analysis of the vendor to see whether how stable the client is, whether we'll get paid. We don't have any upside, so we want to make sure that we get paid. Just to quick check on the antecedents and the background of the people that are approaching you for work. Yeah.
Is it important for you for the game to be fun, for the project to be fun?
Yes, technically no, but in reality yes. I mean, you can't give 110% to something that you absolutely dislike. So that definitely has a bearing in especially in co-development, where you are a part of a virtual team. We could get away with doing work that we don't really have much heart for in the case of pure outsourcing, like art. Maybe you don't really care because you're not really involved in the game in an end-to-end basis. But when you're doing something together, where right from conceptual stage onwards, you're involved with the game design document, fleshing that out and bringing it to a certain, you have to feel for it. Otherwise, you can't really do a great job.
Thank you.
All right. I think time's up as well. All right. Thank you, guys. And if you have any questions,